If you want more listeners for your podcast, then you need to stay on this video because I'm going to be telling you about a brand new feature that will give you more podcast listeners. And also, later on, I'll be telling you why you need to take advantage of this new feature. So, let's get into this video. Before we get further, I just want to let you know that this is a live stream. So if you're watching it in replay, just keep that in mind. Okay, so what is this new feature? You may or may not know that YouTube just released a podcast feature. Yes, that's right. So if you're a podcaster, you can now upload a video podcast on YouTube. And I'll go on later on to talk about how you can actually upload your podcast shows and your episode on YouTube. But this is absolutely amazing news because, yes, there are people on YouTube right now who already upload their video podcast onto YouTube, but having a designated feature and a designated tab on your channel where your podcast will live is such a brilliant idea because now people can specifically find your podcast. So there's going to be such a thing called, I believe it's a podcast badge. So if it is a podcast, it would actually say on somewhere in the title or in the thumbnail that it's a podcast, a video podcast, so people will know. And I just think it's absolutely amazing. So, but before we go ahead, I just want to say, do you have a podcast? If you do, leave the name of your podcast in the comments and a little brief description on what your podcast is about. And yeah, so more people can find it, check it out if it's of interest to us. So, why should you consider uploading your podcast on YouTube? If you see me looking off screen, that's because that's where my notes are. But why should you consider uploading your podcast on YouTube? Well, in 2022, YouTube was actually named the most popular podcast platform, more popular than Spotify, believe it or not. So, and this research was done by, or well, not this research specifically, but I got this figure from Mobile Magazine. And so, yeah, YouTube was named the most popular platform for podcasts. And this is absolutely amazing because that means that more people are actually going on to watch podcasts rather than just listening to it. So I basically just said it. That's why it's more popular. A lot of people are more into video podcasts now as opposed to just audio podcasts. And the reason for this is I believe it's because it gives your listeners an opportunity to connect with you and whoever it is you're interviewing on your podcast. So we don't just hear your voice and sense emotions, we can actually see these emotions. So, for example, if you watch Jay Shetty's podcast, absolutely love his podcast, but you'd know that he always have different guests on his podcast, and they're just so real and raw, these podcast episodes. So it's nice that you don't just have to listen to it, you can now actually see what people are feeling, their emotions, and you can connect with them more. So this is why video podcasts are really, really being more popular in recent times as opposed to just audio only podcasts. The second reason why you should consider uploading your podcast onto YouTube is because YouTube has 2 billion active users every month. So that gives you and your podcast the opportunity to reach 2 billion people every month. That is mad. When you compare it to Spotify that has approximately 489 million active users every month, YouTube's got 2 billion. So that is like Spotify only has like one third of the active users that are on YouTube. So it's a bit crazy how people are sleeping on having their podcast on YouTube. A lot of business owners, and if you don't know, this channel is specifically for business owners who want to start and grow a YouTube channel so they can for their business so they can get more clients through YouTube, and that's what this channel is all about. We give tips and tricks about YouTube that's specific to business owners. But a lot of business owners don't realize that YouTube is like a diamond mine, a gold mine, and they're sitting on it and they're sleeping on it. 2 billion active users that you can actually reach every single month with your podcast, with your videos. So it's ridiculous that you are wasting all this time and energy on platforms that are constantly changing, and you're constantly having to rejig your strategy every single couple of months because they're having an identity crisis. If you know what platform I'm talking about, you know. If you know, leave me a comment down below. Which platform am I talking about is having an identity crisis that's constantly changing its algorithm? I think we all know. I'm not going to mention it. But yeah, so it is absolutely crazy that we're wasting all this time doing all these things when we could also be using YouTube. So as a podcaster, you have a much wider reach on YouTube with the 2 billion active users. Okay, so the third reason is when you upload your video podcast on YouTube, and I'm going to go through how you can do it and the best practices of how to do it so that YouTube algorithm can identify and recognize it as a podcast. But when you do this, it would actually have the opportunity to be included in YouTube Music app. Now, this hasn't fully rolled out yet, so we believe it'll be later on in the year that podcasts who fit this criteria, who are eligible for this and uploaded the right way using the best practices that I'll be going through in a minute, these podcasts will be included in YouTube Music app automatically. So that means your podcast would be on YouTube Music app. If you take the audio version of your podcast, you put it on Spotify and Apple. That is 4 platforms that your podcast um, will be housed in. 4 platforms that you can reach a much wider audience. It is absolutely exciting. And I think it's great that they've included this because not many people, like I personally don't use YouTube Music, but it's just nice to have that option. And you don't need to do an extra bit of work. As far as we know, so far, from what I can see in my research, you don't need to do any extra bit of work. All you need to do is just upload it on YouTube in the way I'm going to go through in a bit. And then when it is ready, you're actually going to be able to automatically appear on YouTube Music app. Okay. The fourth reason, I believe we're number 4 right now, is YouTube is actually more accessible to the rest of the world. Not a lot of people have access to Spotify and Apple. Apple podcast is specifically for people who've got iPhones or some sort of Apple product. So YouTube is more accessible to everyone around the world. Everyone around the world uses YouTube, or at least know what it is. So in terms of accessibility, it is an amazing idea to have your podcast on YouTube. Right. And then the fifth reason, this is actually my prediction. And what it is it gives you a much higher opportunity, much greater chance to join the YouTube partner program. If you don't know what that is, just basically means to get monetized on YouTube. So the reason why I say this is people are more likely to watch a video podcast that is 50 minutes long than a regular video on YouTube that is of the same length, because everyone expects podcasts to be that long. If you see a podcast that's an hour long, it's like, okay, yeah, that's expected because it is a conversation. But with videos, if it's an hour long, usually people are a bit more like, oh, why is it so long? You need to be engaging. It needs to be a really interesting topic. Or if you are a well-known individual on a platform, then people might stick around longer. But when it's a podcast, a video podcast, more people are likely to stick around for a video of 50 minutes, a video podcast of 50 minutes, than a regular video of the same length. So what does this mean? It means that you can actually reach your 4,000 hours of watch time much sooner. because people are sticking around for your long video podcasts, and it just so you'll be able to accumulate those hours much much sooner than if you just upload regular videos on YouTube. So that's my prediction, that um, it would lead to a greater opportunity to get monetized easily and quicker, not necessarily easier, but quicker on YouTube. And also, another prediction of mine is a lot of these social media platforms, when they have a new feature, they like to prioritize reach on this feature. So what that means is they try to encourage more and more people to use that feature. So given that this is a brand new feature on YouTube, my prediction is that they will encourage more and more people to use podcast or to upload a video podcast on YouTube. So they will push and prioritize the reach of video podcasts. That's my prediction. That's what I believe will happen. We saw it with YouTube Shorts. We saw it when Instagram dropped Reels. This is what the platforms do all the time. So I think it's an amazing opportunity. Now is the time to start uploading your podcast onto YouTube. If you're thinking of starting a new if you're starting a new podcast, now's the time to start and start uploading it on YouTube. That is how you can get more listeners for your podcast, because you've got a much wider audience, a much wider reach on YouTube. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how you can actually upload a podcast or video podcast on YouTube. So, in order to do this, is you have to go into YouTube Studios. You can do it from your channel page for now. It hasn't, that feature isn't available yet. So you have to go into YouTube Studios first and click create on the very top. And then once you click create, the drop down menu will come down and you will see new podcast. Click on new podcast, and then it would ask you, are you creating a brand new podcast, or do you want to set a no, do you want to create a podcast playlist, or do you want to set an existing playlist as a podcast? So if it's a brand new podcast show, then click create a new playlist. That's another thing, actually. Every podcast playlist on your channel is your podcast show. So all your episodes need to be uploaded in that playlist in the order that you want your listeners to listen to them. So from the very first episode first to the latest episode last. And so you click on create podcast playlist. I wish I could show it to you, but I can't really share my screen right now. But I'm hoping that the talk through would help. So yeah, you would click on create a new podcast playlist, and then enter the title of your podcast. So, well, the title of your playlist, and the title of your playlist needs to be the same as the title of your podcast. So if your podcast is called All About Marketing, the playlist needs to be called All About Marketing. You don't need to add any extra words to it. Just whatever the title is, that's what needs to be the title of that playlist as well. And then you enter a very dense description of what your podcast is about. Be as descriptive as possible using keywords, because this would help your podcast to appear in search when people search for particular topics. And then I believe the final thing is going to ask you is going to be do you want to set this as public or private? Definitely set it as public so more people can find it. But yeah, okay, we've got a comment. So as you know, I have a playlist from a series which would work. Well, I'll add it as a podcast playlist too. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great idea, Claire. Just add that. Yeah, exactly. Add the videos from the series, the Y files, into your playlist. If you don't know, Claire is my client. So we're working on her YouTube channel, and it's absolutely amazing. She's doing a really great job. So well done, Claire. But yeah, that would really, really help YouTube algorithm to know that this is a podcast. So now we're going to talk about the best practices. So the very first thing you need to do is you need to create a public podcast playlist for each podcast on your channel. So this is each podcast show on your channel, not each episode. So remember, the playlist is the actual show itself. And then every single episode that you record needs to go underneath that playlist. The second one is your podcast name must be the same as your playlist name. So you don't need to add the word podcast or any other words to it. So, like I said, all about marketing, if that's the name of your podcast, that also needs to be the name of your playlist. Now, if it is all about marketing podcast, then you can add all about marketing podcast, but you don't need to add podcast onto you don't need to add podcast as the title. If it's not the title, YouTube would know that it is a podcast because when you selected it, you said you're uploading a podcast. And then the third one is avoid mixing clips of the same podcast or videos. Sorry, Claire said something. I just realized I'm on other. Oh, that's fine, Claire. That's okay. But yeah, avoid mixing clips of the same podcast or videos. So if you create a YouTube short from this video podcast, do not add it to that playlist, to your podcast playlist, because when people are listening to it, it's going to really confuse them. Remember, it's going to be going in the order that you want them to listen to it. So imagine you have a podcast that's like 15 minutes long and then this YouTube short video that's like 30 something seconds long. If it's not part of the actual show, do not upload it into the podcast playlist. And yeah, then the final one, make sure your podcast is filmed. Now, this one is really important because I see a lot of business owners, and I get it. It's it's a lot of work. When you have a podcast, you just want to take the audio and upload it on YouTube and slap on a static image and call it a day. But remember, YouTube is a video platform, a video content platform, not an audio platform. That would work well for Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all these other places, but not for YouTube. Think about it this way. Imagine you went to Ann Summers. Ann Summers, for those of you who don't know, is a lingerie adult shop. And you went to Ann Summers and you usually find really gorgeous lingerie, but then instead of gorgeous lingerie, they've got granny panties. You would most likely be disappointed and walk out. That's what happens when someone sees this amazing thumbnail and they click onto it and it's a static image with an audio playing in the background. They want to see a video, not a static image. So if you know that you have podcasts already recorded, but you don't have video to go with them, just put together maybe stock videos I would play in the background, or that would play on over the screen. They'll show up in the screen while your audio is playing. And then in the future, do film your podcast. I really think it's an amazing opportunity to have video podcasts on YouTube. This will help a lot of people to reach a much wider audience. So let me know, do you have a podcast? Let me know in the comments. If you're watching this in the replay later on, write the name of your podcast in the comments and a brief description of what your podcast is about. And if you are a business owner looking to start on YouTube, so either that's you've got a podcast, you want to start putting it on YouTube, or you just want to upload regular videos on YouTube, then get in touch with me on Instagram at the Jennifer Fanning. So that's TheJenniferFanning. Send me a message there. We'll get talking because I can totally help you with that. I train people how to start and grow their YouTube channel. And then for some of my clients who do not want to do the work themselves, I actually take it on for them. So they film the videos and edit it, design the thumbnails, and I upload it all on YouTube. So all you'd have to do is film the video and I'll take care of the rest. So yeah, that's me done for today. Let me know in the comments what your podcast name is, or if you do want to start a podcast, what's going to be about. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next live stream. Bye.